hear a little bit about how you first recognized that you were struggling with depression or anxiety, how old you were, what kind of circumstances you were in.
The first time that I can really, recall anything severe was in college, and it was probably heading towards my junior year, and I just worked a lot and, didn't really have direction at that time, and I'd have panic attacks in class, and I think my trend was just at 2 o'clock in the morning, I would, like clockwork, my heart would race, and I thought I was having heart problems, and it would scare me to death, and that eventually led to me moving from here. I just at the time couldn't control it, and it led to high blood pressure, and I just, didn't have the ability to control it at that time.
Okay. And when did the depression actually happen? Because that's obviously more anxiety.
At that time, I don't think that I did have depression. I definitely remember the anxiety piece, and I went home, got a job, kind of cleaned up my life a little bit, and actually I joined a health club, started exercising, taking care of myself, and my blood pressure started dropping, and my physician kind of went over, that was definitely anxiety and panic attacks, and I started the process of kind of understanding myself. Depression, I've gone through bouts of where I'm generally a very, very happy person, but I've been through bouts where I can get hit like a hammer and get sad.
What happens?
More or less.
What happens? What do you feel?
Honestly, it's like a sharp pain in the back of my neck, and I get low, just very low. And
hopeless feeling?
Very hopeless feeling. I've done that. I can't really pick a point at where I think that necessarily started. I've just been through that a lot. I know that headaches and literally some pain has come with that. I know that sleep would always accompany.
Have you ever been suicidal?
One time that I know that I was, I definitely was suicidal. I was having very, recurring suicidal thoughts.
Did you ever act on any of that?
Not really, not in a way, but I think I got close.
Wow.
I had if you ask what a suicidal thought was, I didn't know if I was having a suicidal thought or just a thought that was helping me deal with pressure. But at the time, I had a tremendous amount of pressure. I have 2 kids with disabilities. We were dealing with multiple surgeries and medical bills, and I managed a large business that was not doing well at the time, and I was at the point where I could see it was all kind of coming down. And at that time, as far as what a suicidal thought was, I would close my eyes and literally visualize driving into the side of a bridge. And
oh, my goodness.
As I closed my eyes, I could kind of, and there would be a temporary relief there almost. To the extent that I would replay that over and over, it almost became a trigger mechanism for relief in a way. And I think that's where I started doing that hundreds of times a day. I could do that
obsessing about it.
Yeah, and oddly enough, I think I could do it while I was high-fiving people at work.
Wow.
So it was an odd coping mechanism, and I was not sure whether that was a coping mechanism or what I was doing exactly. I just know that I would get so overwhelmed with pressure, and I also had to keep things together and keep my cool and run a business and take care of my family. So,
sure.
At the time I thought maybe I was getting a little crazy, but I didn't know whether that was depression or anxiety or what.
What made you decide that you needed help outside of yourself, that you couldn't handle it alone?
Well, at the time my days were long, hard, and when I would come home, I was just crashed and wiped out, and my wife was extremely worried about me. She actually said I look like the Cymbalta commercial, and I did. It was just,
Not laughing at the Cymbalta commercial,
yeah, but I just didn't have anything left in the tank at all. I mean, when I came home, I was mentally and physically exhausted, and my head hurt, my body hurt, and I know I'm that guy at that time. Nobody would have had a clue that I was that way, but I could not physically or mentally take it anymore. And
were you consciously trying to hide it, Stuart?
At that time, yes. I mean, we had a ton on our plate. I mean, we had twins, and my son, we'd just 2 or 3 years prior gotten his autism diagnosis, and then we had twins, and my daughter, one of my girls, had tremendous medical needs and major surgeries, and my wife certainly had enough to contend with keeping all that together while I worked, than to have to deal with, hey, I'm losing it. I managed nearly 200 people, and
wow.
As the economy was getting close to tanking, there was a lot of pressure of running an expanding business that then suddenly was in decline. And when you're a manager, you can see it coming, and how do you fix it? And you're just trying to find an answer that might not be there. So really everything at that time, I think, was just flat out of my control. But I think I was very much trying to find an answer and control it. And that was probably my biggest spiral. I didn't have any answers, and I would just end up in mental exhaustion really at that time.
You made a decision to come into therapy. What was that decision like to make? Did you tell anyone, for example, that you were coming into therapy?
Well, my wife told me I was going to. I didn't make a decision.
Sometimes that's a setup for failure. But
well, she was right, and I knew she was right. And it was the right approach with me. She was worried about me, and I knew that she was worried about me. And she'd asked me a million times if I was okay, and I would say yes, and I was not okay. But I broke down one night, and I said I needed help. And I said that to her, and she was seeing you at the time, because she'd been seeing you for a while, dealing with everything that we'd been going through, and I was not. And so I agreed to do it. I knew I needed to do something. So really it was my wife that helped me pull the trigger, and it was definitely, mine was a situation where I could keep that from everybody at work, and I don't think anybody would ever had a clue that I wouldn't I would get compliments on, wow, you have a lot on your plate. I'm so impressed with how y'all handle things.
You're so strong. It's amazing.
Yeah, on a very
That's
regular.
What people say.
Yeah, when I was we just, it's all easy, and I'd get home, and I was just, like I say, I was just wiped out, and Missy got the bad part of me, tired and no energy, and that wasn't fair, and so the timing, I think probably some of that was just when you can't hide it anymore, which was time to do something.
Okay. So you made the choice to come into therapy, albeit at your wife's request. What did you experience in therapy that was helpful? What helped you get over that hump or understand it more?
At the time that I started, I still was employed at my last job. Pressure cooker was really high. I had a very large surgery with my daughter on the horizon. And I think I really, when I kind of unloaded that I was feeling that way, the first relief was that when I described, are these thoughts crazy?
Mm-hmm.
Am I the only one having them?
Mm-hmm.
What,
the answer
and
was
the
no.
answer was that no, that it's, it's okay, and but you do have to, it's serious, then you do have to start working to get to the bottom of it. And at that point, I really actually just speaking about it. I didn't want to tell my wife at that time what type of thought was in my head. Mm-hmm. Just that I was, pretty severely depressed, I felt like, and I needed to do something. But the actual thought that was going through my head myself, I needed someone to talk to that wasn't my wife, wasn't a family member, wasn't anybody that I
So someone
knew.
without an agenda.
Yeah.
Someone who could listen objectively.
Yeah. And myself at that time, I didn't understand it. I was lost.
So did you go on medication, or were you already on medication?
I was fighting medication tooth and nail at that particular time. There again, I manage health clubs for a living. So it's hard to be the guy that, first off manages people, and I've got to have the right, face on. You've got to motivate people and rally your staff, and then at the same time, people come straight to me looking to, get their life on track. And so, no, I didn't want...
Because what did you believe about medication? Did you think you wouldn't be yourself?
I felt like, actually, certainly in my industry, that you don't have to be on medication if you exercise.
Got it.
You simply can beat everything if you just exercise. And I certainly believed that, too. I actually... when I was 22, I went on high blood pressure medication when I was battling the anxiety, and I fought tooth and nail to get off of the high blood pressure medication, and I did. But, I still have to sometimes fight my blood pressure. It's a battle, and it's heredity, and, it's, a lot of genetic factors as well as a lot of bad eating sometimes and things involved. But I have definitely have the mentality from just what I do for a living that I can defeat it. And I finally learned that I was wrong. I just couldn't. I had a lot of issues that I couldn't sleep. I couldn't think. I would get into a fog, and then I just couldn't be productive the way that I needed to be. And but I think still to this day I wrestle with that a little bit.
So do you know specifically what began helping you crawl out of that hole?
Well, truthfully, when I did get on medication, I agreed to get on medication, when we began to talk about what was going through my head. And I do believe that it put the brakes on. I started taking Lexapro at the time, and it did put the brakes on. And I think that of all things that I needed, I was in a severe situation that de-escalated.
Right.
And so there was time to start feeling better and feel like I could do this. And so that was empowering for me. And as I got to feeling better, I stopped doing medication a couple of times.
Which is very common.
Yeah, I just felt like I'm doing well enough to stop it, and then I really didn't do well. So that was that was a big challenge for me.
And you and your wife did marital therapy as well. Was that helpful?
We did. We finally, at that particular time, I started doing better, but as the economy really kind of went south, I lost my job. My daughter had just come back from a 3-week surgery in Dallas, and it was a gastrointestinal surgery, and she went into liver failure, and it was just a very scary time for us. And we went from full paid insurance to our COBRA payments went to $1,700. I lost my job. We had moved into too big of a house. We had everything that was about that economy at the time. Healthcare, everything seemingly happening to us, and it was just it was more stress than either one of us could handle. And we had so much going on with our children, and I couldn't find a job at that time either. So what we had I determined at some point just to get an SBA loan and build my own job. And
so part of that getting better was about looking for what you did have control over and exerting some influence on that.
You mean as far as having, finding... Well,
like starting your own club and...
Starting my own club, I definitely would say I'm a reluctant business owner. I love what I do. I don't know that I ever had the passion to start my own business. I had to. And I love taking care of people. But yes, it was very empowering at the time, and I think it drove me and helped me. But at the same time, when you build your own business, you also add debt and employees, and it was still a tough time. The economy was down, and we continued to have more medical issues. And I think we also had so much stress we weren't talking and dealing with it appropriately.
You said to me, Stuart, when we talked before about this interview, that what you've learned is that you're not struggling with depression, you're living with depression. What do you mean by that?
I think at this point I've been going through the acceptance of depression and anxiety for long enough that I'm not sure that it's going away. But I feel like I've got enough skills to live with it. I have a flare-up time to time. Something will trigger.
That's what doesn't go away.
That doesn't go away. I do feel like I know how to deal with it so much better now, how to put the brakes on.
What do you do to put the brakes on?
Well, I guess the last time that I had that issue, honestly, I did need to crawl into bed.
You were tired. It's fatigue.
I had a headache. It is sometimes like I have to pull over to the side of the road and I'll get hit. And it doesn't mean that I'm in a bad state of my life at that time. Sure. It could be an incident or something that triggers that to happen. And I can come home and talk to my wife and go, here's what's going on, and here's what I need to do.
So another way of putting that would be good self-care, actually tuning in to what's going on with you.
I know that I've got to go for a walk. I know that I've got to get into the gym and lift weights for a little while because I just put my head somewhere else. I take care of myself. And I know that now I've got an outlet instead of kind of hiding things from my wife so that I'm thinking I'm protecting her. Actually, she's a support system for me and we communicate a lot better.
So I also know, because you've told me, that you participated in not just one-on-one therapy, or even marital therapy, but that you took a couple of weekends and did a group program.
Yeah, actually, it was really fantastic. I would have never gone to it in a million years had I known what it was about. It was very intense, and it was while my wife and I were in couples therapy trying to get our marriage back together. And I had already moved out of the house. And a friend of mine who'd gone through a pretty tough state of depression himself, he went through a program called Discovery in Dallas. And he really wouldn't tell me enough about what it was, but he just thought it would help. And I found myself living in a little house by myself, and my wife and my kids were, down the street, and I felt like if I wanted to get them back, I needed to do anything possible.
So what was one of the major things that you experienced there?
Actually, there were about 40 people in my group, and I think that was it. You broke down your problems with other people.
You get perspective on yourself, and then you get the feedback from them.
I saw that everybody had something. I think the first time they had me they broke everybody out and had everybody, partner up and look someone else in the eye and, just start sharing what was in your heart for a period. And I went first and kind of unloaded what was in mine. And there was this young woman, not 24 years old. I didn't know what she was there. It was obvious that she had drug issues and several other things. And as she unloaded her turn, and she was so nice, and I, crying when she was listening to my problems. But when I listened to her, she'd been raped as a child and been abused. And there were things that I just didn't, you hear about but didn't know you existed. And here you were holding hands with somebody that was she was more concerned about my problems.
Wow.
And it definitely put a lot of things in perspective for me. Over the course of that weekend, I met so many people that I just went, well, everybody's just got something.
That's true. I would agree with that.
And that was probably the most powerful thing is that, everybody's got something, and you just have to develop a set of skills and learn to deal with it,
So you came to me and told me you knew about my blog. And you said, if there's anything I can do to help, I will. You didn't know that I was doing a series of posts about men and depression and therapy at the time. I sort of lit up and said, great. we had to go over the fact that you had been a patient of mine and make sure that you didn't feel any kind of compulsion to do that because of that, but you assured me that you didn't. But tell me why this has been so important to you. What is it about telling your story now that feels significant, important?
Mostly it's that I feel like I've had a tremendous amount of success. I really feel as strong as I've felt in years personally. My marriage I've been married 20 years this year, and the last 5 have been better than the first 5.
Wow,
I can
that's fantastic.
honestly say that. And we've had more challenges in the past couple of years. My daughter we're looking at a liver transplant this year. And I'm managing that stress, and I'm managing well. I mean, and where I used to think maybe it would be cowardly to let people know that about me, I think now, knowing that I can have some success and that I'm learning to deal with that better, it would be cowardly for me not to share it.
Wow.
In the health and wellness business, people walk through my door all the time, and I've known it for years. I can see it in their face. They want to make a change.
Mm-hmm.
They're unhappy. They know that they can start. I've got to start feeling better about myself, but there's more to it than that. You have to also, it's an overwhelming challenge. Sometimes people have a lot of barriers, and I've seen them drop out so quick. There was more to it than just exercising. Exercise is huge. It's a massive part
Yes,
of
it is.
feeling better, but it's just a part, and I've seen customers I know were in depression, but we manage hundreds, if not thousands, sometimes of customers, and I've been through suicides of past friends, acquaintances, a lot of colleagues. And after a while, you get tired of seeing that. And yeah, I do think.
So if you had one thing, I know that's a lot of pressure, but if you had one thing to say to a man who may be watching this, what would you say to him in order to encourage him to follow the same path that you have, or a similar one? What has to change in his
Well, you have
mind?
to take care of yourself. I mean, the one thing that if I learned anything, I wasn't taking care of myself. To a point, I owned a health club, and I wasn't physically taking care of myself. I was so stressed out. I was stress eating and drinking, that not doing a good job, and I was concerned with taking care of my family. The one thing is, if I finally would take care of myself, I could do a better job taking care of my family, and I got my family back. I think for so many people, I've got to take care of all these other people, and I come last, and that doesn't work. And it wasn't working for me. And so that probably, the other thing is, if those kinds of thoughts are running through your head, do something about it. It's I see it in my business all the time with someone that's complaining about a rotator cuff. Well, you got to do something about it. If your back hurts, you got to do something. There's simple exercises that take care of things. In depression, maybe it's not so different, but you do have to. I didn't have an education on how to deal with it, and I had to get started down that path. Wasn't easy.
So, Stuart, why do you think that men don't seek therapy?
Why don't men seek therapy?
As often as women do, I should say.
Well, there's lots of reasons. I think one is certainly a sign of weakness. Men want to take a leadership role, and you don't want to have a sign of weakness out there. You want to control, or you want to certainly feel in control of yourself. So you're kind of submitting when you go to therapy, so to speak, that you don't. You're maybe not in control of your relationship or your thoughts or your mind at that point.
It's funny that you would use the term leadership, because one of the points that I made in an earlier video is that really good leaders surround themselves with people that give them advice, or they go outside of themselves and they may not act on that advice, but they seek it out.
Right.
And it's interesting that men still stereotypically see that as, on an individual basis, as a weakness rather than them leading themselves in the way that they would look at someone else and go, oh, well, he or she knows exactly what they're doing because they're listening to what other people have to say. So that's an interesting point.
And I think, that's very true. And I think leading oneself is hard to do. I think it's, some of the most powerful leaders out there are not necessarily the most happy people. So I certainly think that's one. I think getting down to the root of where something's coming from. I mean, I know forever when I felt like I was dealing with depression or if that thought was entering my mind, I guess the picture that I have of a depressed person is someone that's got a lot of baggage in their history. And I certainly, I have fantastic parents and great relationships with them. I love my wife. I've got fantastic kids. I have a lot of medical issues with them, but I don't really have anything. I have a lot of appreciation. I have a lot of gratitude. I had a great high school experience. I don't have things that I can go back and find that, and so you definitely go, well I lean on that and go, well, it can't possibly be depression. What do I have to be depressed about?
So did you ever wonder if depression and anxiety ran in your family?
I have. And since I've been dealing with depression, I've asked more questions of my mom and, just to find out, more about my grandparents, other family members. And I've got, I've lost cousins to different situations and family members that I know that depression was part of their history. So it's there if you start peeling back the layers and looking.
Sure.
In general, my extended family too, on the surface, everybody looks great, but I think we all probably have things to deal with in life that come up.
And a lot of times addictions cover up those things. So you might say, oh, there's no depression or anxiety in my family, but my grandfather was alcoholic, or my uncle, did drugs or whatever. And a lot of times that's all
a lot of times
masking.
Alcoholism turns into a slow, painful suicide over time. It's just a long process of taking your life instead of dealing with it. Yeah. So we definitely have a lot of that in our family as well.
So has that helped with your own acceptance of what has gone on with you, to realize there's part of this I had no control over since it's just in my genes?
To a certain extent, yeah. I mean, I think every little piece of information helps me feel more comfortable with just really honestly knowing how to live with it. And just, and really maybe accept that it might never go away. And I'll just have to learn how, when I have a flare-up, how to proceed.
How to manage it. Thank you so much, Stuart.
Thank you very much, too.
Yeah.